I talked about objectivity, I think, a little this morning or last night. I'm not really sure. I'm on page 7. Is it possible to be truly objective? From a larger perspective, or from the largest perspective, we could say that we could share a reality. In other words, where you and I would be perceiving exactly the same things, the same information, and the same possibilities inherent within that information if we had simultaneous awareness of everything going on at once. So in other words, if I could represent all possibilities as a finite line, and I can't, but you know, because it's infinite, but let's say I could represent all possibilities that exist in this line that has finite boundaries between here and here. The only possible way that we could share an objective reality is if all of us had the capability of perceiving every possibility and every distinction in any given moment, because we'd be experiencing exactly the same thing. Are you with me on this? We'd be experiencing exactly the same thing because all the information that was available we would be perceiving in the same way. We'd be perceiving all of it. Remember, beliefs limit what we perceive. Beliefs limit what we perceive. So if you and I are operating out of different beliefs, which we are, it means that although we assume that everyone's sharing our reality in any given moment, because each of us think that our reality is self-evident. Now think about this. In any given moment, each of us think that our reality is self-evident and everyone else has to be sharing it, right? Why wouldn't we?
Sure.
Which of course is not the case. And the only way that it could be is if, again, we could have the capability of having simultaneous awareness of everything going on at once. If we have not evolved to that state of that place where we can have simultaneous awareness of everything going on at once, it means that we are perceiving something less than what's being made available. What we perceive in relationship to what's available is based on what we've learned to believe. If you and I have learned to believe different things, then we can assume that in any given moment we are not going to be perceiving reality in the same way. It's that simple. And so from a macro perspective, we really can't be objective. However, from the individual's perspective, the micro perspective, we are the micro or the macro, okay? From the individual's perspective, whatever it is that we have learned to perceive out of what's available, we can be objective in the sense that, are we in a state of mind where we have access to everything we've learned? Is there anything about what's going on in this moment that's being blocked by some mechanism inside of our mental environment? If there isn't, then we are being objective. To the capability or to the extent that we're capable of. We are being objective to the extent that we are capable of. To any degree that we are experiencing fear, it starts shutting down this perceptual process. The greater the degree of fear, the less possibilities we perceive. Until we get to the point where if we're in a state of complete terror, we may not see any other possibilities at all except what's going on in that moment. In a moment where, if you're in a state of terror, in a moment that seems to never end. It could be 5 seconds and it could seem like 5 days. Euphoria is exactly the opposite. It's like there's no capability to perceive any limitations. You've lost your capability to perceive any other possibilities other than, in a sense, it's not really, I don't know if it's really shut down. In a way, I guess even euphoria is kind of shut down your perceptual process in a way. I haven't really thought of it that way, but I think, Yeah, in a positive sense, yeah, really, in a positive sense, you're in a state of mind that where you would be wouldn't be capable of perceiving really anything other than what you want. Success.
You don't see failure.
You're capable of perceiving any other possibility other than getting your expectations fulfilled.
Sounds like overtraining to me.
Oh yeah, it's a prescription for it. What? Yeah, you can't perceive the risk, right? Yeah, there is no risk. In a state of euphoria, there's virtually no risk.
No stops.
No stops, no nothing.
Yikes.
So does everybody understand the nature of objectivity and what's going on? Basically what you want to do, an objective state of mind for each of us as individuals is just making sure that we have access to everything we've learned. And our perceptual process isn't being shut down by some internal mechanism like fear. Or the potential to define and interpret information in a threatening way. So can we control our state of mind to experience greater levels of happiness and satisfaction in our lives? Yes, but to do so, we have to be willing to question and change our definitions to incorporate other possibilities that exist from the environment's perspective. In other words, we have to be willing to de-energize something that we've already learned. I've talked very little about this process of questioning, but it's something we're going to get into when we get into all the various techniques on how to one, identify beliefs and how to change them. A lot of it has to do really with just your willingness to question things. And what I mean by question things is most of the times people ask questions basically just wanting verification of what they already think is right and true. I mean asking a question from a sincere space of wanting an answer. Because you have to assume that if you knew the answer, you wouldn't ask the question in the first place. So to ask a sincere question, now think about this, to ask a sincere question, you have to be operating out of the assumption that you really don't know. That's a really important distinction. Because what I'm saying is that when you ask a sincere question, it creates a vacuum in your mind that will be filled with information. It opens up the creative process. Asking a sincere question opens up the creative process. And you start getting access to what people might normally define as even inspirational information. Inspirational in a sense that is not coming from a rational thought process. It's coming from out there in the universe somewhere. It's hard to know where it's coming from. The best examples that I can give you of that is that The Disciplined Trader and Trading in the Zone were both written that way. You'll notice there aren't any footnotes in either of those books. And the reason why is because I did not refer to other people's work. I specifically stayed away from other people's work. Those books, both of them were written by simply asking questions. And the answer just got dumped into my brain. No different than someone writing a song, doing works of art. But the questions I asked were genuinely sincere questions. I really didn't have the answers. I really wanted to know. I had pieces. I had enough pieces to ask a question. And then I would just be in a situation where I was either doing some consulting or coaching work with somebody, and all of a sudden I would hear myself saying the answer to the question I asked maybe the day before or a few hours before. It's like I'm saying, oh my God, this is it. This is the answer. I've never said this before. I've never thought it before. And one of the things I did was I had this rule where I diligently wrote down. Anytime this happened, I always stopped and wrote it down, no matter where I was at. I don't care, a guy was paying me $200 or $300 an hour. I actually stopped the process, I wrote it all down, and then continued with the appointment. That always came first. I didn't charge him for the time I was writing, but the point is, it took longer. He had to stay. It might have taken me a half an hour to write all this stuff out. You will find if you get into this kind of process, you will find you can do the same thing with the market. You can simply ask where the next best edge is going to be. And find that the next thing on the chart that your awareness is drawn to, just, and see what happens.
Back over just a second here.
Oh, I heard something good there, eh, Dave? No, I'm sorry.
When you're saying we're willing to question in order to change the state of mind, are you saying we're questioning the beliefs that are altering our state of mind? Are we getting at here?
Well, no, what you're doing is just, it could be that. It could be any number of things. What you're doing is just, you're asking a question. You're asking a question because you want information. Now, a lot of it has to do with, just like you can say, asking a question for information that might be subconscious, or questioning a particular way that, particular belief that you might have, so that you can, like I said, you can experience, if you've noticed that there are reoccurring dissatisfying experiences in your life. That's the thing that I'm talking about. You can assume that that isn't the only possibility that exists under those circumstances. Make that assumption. And then as a result of making that assumption, start asking sincere questions so that you can dismantle the closed loop.
That's what
Okay. Okay, I thought you were referring to the trading things. That's why I kind of responded the way I did. Okay. About asking where the next best edge is.
No. I'll ask you later.
Okay. I do that all the time, by the way. I really do.
That's great.
Yeah, really. It's pretty cool the way it works.
Works for other things. I've done it.
Yeah.
I've really done it from a belief standpoint, but in terms of like business and stuff, it's like, how can we grow this segment to the next level?
Sure.
You ask yourself that enough times, eventually you can answer.
That's right. You really will. And where does the answer come from?
It pops out of your head.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. It's like, where does it come from? It's just, it's just like it comes from wherever.
Your mind starts working on it because
Yeah.
You told it.
you put it for it.
Yeah, we
It's
do
supposed
have
to
the
not be-
we do have the capability of garnering information and insight from out there somewhere that isn't inside our memory banks, okay? Not organized at the rational level of thinking.
Inspirational.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, you have to ask a question from a sincere space. Yeah, the power of questions. It is really powerful. Yeah, well, the wording has a lot to do with it. I mean, what he's saying here is that because I don't know if they picked it up on the mic, but he's saying, like, why am I a failure? You can ask a question like, why am I a failure? You really can. That's not a bad question to ask. However, but what you did say about properly wording the question, the wording has really everything to do with it. It really does. How you word your questions is virtually, well, I'd say, it's really important, I guess, because the answers you're going to get are going to be within the context of how you worded it. You're going to get something that pertains to the wording as opposed to maybe something else that you might have wanted, but you didn't word it properly, based on what you wanted. Go ahead, Greg.
It's kind of like, if you want a better answer, ask a better question.
That's right. You're very good. So that's okay. If that didn't get on the tape, Greg said, if you want a better answer, ask a better question, because you will get an answer that corresponds with the question you asked. What time is it? 2:45? Okay, as soon as we get done with this, we're going to listen to the tape. We're going to take a short break and listen to the tape. How do we do this? We'll start from, I'm on section 4, page 9, and Roman, why don't you start with the first point and read that? We're going to go this way, like this. Just go ahead and read it.
Everything we have learned throughout our lives is structured energy.
Go ahead.
This structured energy will operate inside of our mental environment as a source of power, causing us to perceive and respond to the outside environment in a way that is consistent with this energy.
The environment can express itself in an infinite combination of ways. What each of us perceive and experience is very small in relationship with what is available in any given moment. In other words, instead of assuming that we already know, we can assume that we haven't learned to make every possible distinction that exists in each situation of our lives. Inherent within the distinctions we haven't learned to make yet is an opportunity to experience satisfaction.
Go ahead, John.
Fear causes us to narrow our focus of attention on the object of our fear, drastically reducing our perception of what is available or possible from the environment's perspective.
Many dysfunctional beliefs and fears operate at an unconscious level, blocking us into cycles of dissatisfaction, frustration, and depression.
Learning something new is often blocked by the way the energy is already structured inside of us. In other words, once we learn a belief, it will forever shape our lives unless we unlearn it.
Or I should say, to draw the energy out of it.
Every advancement in human civilization, whether it be cultural, scientific, or otherwise, came from someone who challenged the status quo by questioning what he had learned. The act of questioning opens us up to perceive the existence of other possibilities. If we assume that happiness and satisfaction exist as a possibility, then it is up to each individual to find that happiness and satisfaction by discovering these possibilities. To discover anything new, you will have to be willing to question and look beyond what you've already learned to believe about what is true or available.
Now, the way that I like to illustrate that last point about the nature of questions is that if this circle, well, let's just say this circle, again, a very erroneous thing to do, but this circle represents the universe, meaning what's available to be learned in the way of distinctions about the inherent properties and characteristics of the whole universe, right? Okay? And you can say that, let's say 100 years ago, that the sum total of humanity, both alive at that time and recorded in some way up to that time, that was still in existence, might have made, in terms of knowledge or distinctions, this much in relationship to everything else that exists. And what's happened in the last 100 years is, let's say we've expanded that circle, let's say by something like that. How does the circle get expanded?
Questions.
Yeah. In other words, someone's willing to operate on the fringe. There's always somebody that's willing to operate out there on the fringe of what's possible. Go out, discover something, bring it back to the rest of us for us to say what?
Yes, sir.
You crazy?
Yeah, you're crazy. Not yes. Virtually always you're crazy. No, that's not possible. No, that's not real. No, that doesn't exist. And why? Because it's just the inherent way beliefs operate, right? It's conflicting information, contradicts what we already believe to be true. Not true. But it might intrigue someone enough, another person, to go out there and come back and say, hey, this guy's right. And then somebody else does, and somebody else does, and next thing you know, the circle gets expanded a little bit. All of us are in this circle. If you take the sum total of everything that's in everyone's mind alive today, everything that's in the mind of everyone alive today, plus what's been recorded from human history that exists, that by this circle, then each of us are a part of that make up the whole, are some percentage of that circle. So how do we expand our own circle? The same way, go challenging what we believe to be true and questioning things and see what happens.
status quo.
Yeah, challenge the status quo. It does seem as if that's what we're supposed to do. We are evolving into something. There isn't any question about the fact that humanity is evolving. If that weren't the case, then we would still be living like most of the people probably in Afghanistan. The sum total of humanity is evolving. There are definitely cultures that are not in the same, we're all not in the same spot, but we are definitely going somewhere. And it does seem as if there is a desire on the part of the universe as a whole to expand. Scientists already know that it's expanding. Now, if it's expanding at the macro level, wouldn't it make sense that because we exist at the micro level of an expanding universe, that if the universe as a whole is expanding, that if we're going to live within this universe in a way where we can create, let's say, happiness and satisfaction for ourselves, in other words, create a really satisfying life, wouldn't it make sense that we have to be in harmony with that expansion? Yeah, that the less that the more that we resist evolving, the more it seems that the universe kind of conspires against us, it's in conflict with us. And that would make sense because everything is in motion. Everything is constantly changing. Nothing is staying the same. No two moments could ever duplicate themselves, ever. And the only way that could happen is if every atom of every molecule was in the exact same spot it was at some previous moment. Now, from a practical perspective, I don't think that's possible. But the interesting part is every belief we've ever acquired can remain static exactly the way it was originally formulated for our whole lives. So we've got beliefs that remain static and a universe that's constantly expanding and changing. Beliefs that cause us to see the now moment as it exists in our lives instead of the way it really exists from the environment's perspective. And if we aren't willing to adapt our beliefs to correspond with this constant expansion, it will seem as if the environment is conspiring against us. And it will create stress. It will create anxiety. Because the stress and the anxiety is our own resistance to change. So let's take about a 15-minute break and we'll listen to the tape. From the Monroe Institute in Virginia, and they've been doing work in the area of how high-frequency sounds affect states of consciousness for probably over 40 years. They've got a real distinguished staff of doctors and PhDs, mostly from like Harvard and Yale and all your Eastern Ivy League colleges. And I started using their tapes many years ago, not only for myself, but to use in my workshops because I wanted a technique that I could give people that they could use to help them neutralize their fears. There's, specifically those 4 trading fears on being wrong, losing money, missing out, and leaving money on the table. That was effective. What's that, Jake? What? I don't know. It's not on any page. That was effective, but at the same time met certain criteria, and the criteria was this. Instead of using hypnosis tapes or like specifically subliminal hypnosis tapes, one of the things that I found is that subliminal hypnosis tapes can be very effective, or even hypnosis tapes for that matter, can be very effective if what you're trying to do, in other words, whatever message that's on the tape, if the message itself is not in conflict with anything else that's in your mind, then the tapes can be quite effective. And so when you hear people talk about the power of self-hypnosis or hypnosis and how well it worked for them, chances are it was a circumstance in which whatever message they wanted to embed in their mind was not in conflict with anything else that was already in their mind. And so what you'd get is a glowing testimony or testimonial. However, when the message on a hypnosis tape is in conflict with something else that's in your mind, then what you're doing is setting up an inherent conflict, because what the tapes generally don't do, or don't, I've never seen them do, is help you neutralize whatever conflicting beliefs that you might have with the new message or the new way in which you want to express yourself. So in other words, this process of change is always a two-pronged process in many cases. One, de-energizing the beliefs that let's say you've determined are dysfunctional or are not useful any longer, and at the same time energizing and installing a new belief that compels you to express yourself in a way that's consistent with your desires or goals. So you've got to do both. So the reason why I picked these tapes is because instead of being passive, meaning that instead of you just listening to a tape, this particular technique requires you to be active. Meaning that what this tape does is it uses high frequency sounds to install what would, I guess, be commonly referred to as like an anchor inside your mind. An anchor would be considered a tool. And as a tool, like any tool, a tool that might be in your toolbox is completely useless until you pick it up and use it. In other words, it has no use until, or function until you actually pick it up and use it. And it's the same way with the tool that's going to be installed in your mind from this tape. It has to be used, or otherwise it does nothing. So basically what's going to happen is this. I picked a tape, and there are a whole range of tapes that you can get from the Monroe Institute that have different purposes on this, in this HemiSync, in the HemiSync category. There are a number of different programs they have and a number of different types of tapes. But if you've looked at the catalog itself, has everybody looked at it? Just take a moment to look at the catalog and see the different uses they've designed these tapes for. The one that I picked was the boy, that's where my brain is. What's that? The what tape did I pick? What? No, that's the name. Yeah, DHAB. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, DHAB. You'll notice what does it say about the DHAB tape? To neutralize habitual behaviors.
Eliminate or diminish undesirable mental, emotional, or physical habits. Use anytime you're about to follow a behavior pattern you wish to change. Break free of anger or old emotional patterns. Eliminate thoughts of failure or move beyond a cycle of negativity.
Okay.
See John Daggett.
So what I've done is basically adapt this technology specifically for the purpose of helping people who come to this workshop neutralize their fear of being wrong, missing out, leaving money on the table, and being wrong. And we'll get into the actual techniques later on. In other words, the techniques of using, how we're going to use the tape, we're going to get into. Maybe not today, if not this afternoon, by the time you're done, tomorrow morning. However, the reason why we're listening to it today is because it requires 3 listenings, meaning that we're going to listen to it once right now. You're going to listen to the prep side of the tape. The prep side of the tape is just getting your mind prepared to get this function command installed when you listen to the other side of the tape, the DHAB side of the tape. You've got to listen to the prep side of the tape twice. We're going to listen to it now. I'm going to ask you to rewind it and listen to it again tonight. And then tomorrow we'll listen to the DHAB side. Now, all this tape is basically high frequency sounds, and you'll hear, I don't know if it's Bob Monroe any longer or a guy by the name of Mark, I don't remember his last name. But anyway, Bob Monroe's now dead, but he used to be the voice on the tape, and you won't hear him very much anyway. But there's a couple of things. One, the tapes are incredibly relaxing. I haven't had anybody yet that's come to one of these workshops that really hasn't enjoyed the experience of listening to the tape. Now, you can listen to this tape as much as you want. You can't listen to it while you're driving or anything else like that, because you'll probably end up falling asleep. You don't have to fall asleep. When Bob Monroe or whoever's talking on this particular version of the tape says, you know, for your hands and arms and legs to go to sleep, he's not telling you to go to sleep. He's telling those particular parts of your body to go to sleep. If you end up falling asleep, that's all right. It's no big deal. He'll wake you up at the end of the tape. And again, you can listen to this tape as much as you want. If you like it and you want to use it as a relaxation tape, listen to it all you want. This tape will do nothing to get rid of your fears by itself. Listening to the tape has no effect on your fears. Only consciously using the function command when it gets installed in your mind on the other side of the tape, when you consciously take the steps of using the function command, will it have any impact on your fears. Are you guys with me on this? I know maybe it can sound confusing. Sean?
On the second side.
The tool's on the second side. Well, okay. What I'm saying is that listening to the tape in and of itself doesn't have any effect on whatever fears you might be wanting to neutralize. Although you can listen to the tape as much as you want. Bob Monroe doesn't know what your fears are. Bob Monroe, when they designed the tape, does not know what habitual behavior you want to neutralize. That's up to you to decide what habitual behavior you want to utilize by taking the tool out of the toolbox and using it in the appropriate moment, meaning that it requires a conscious decision on your part. That's why I picked this technology. It's not passive, it's active. You don't take a part in it, nothing happens. Are you guys with me on this? John, are you with me? All right. Okay, now, so put the tape in the machine. The prep side of the tape. Turn Dolby off if you've got it. If you've got an expensive machine and have Dolby sound reduction, turn Dolby off. When everyone gets their headphones on, I'm going to tell you when to turn it on, and everyone turn it on at the same time, so we're finishing at the same time. It'll last approximately 28 or 29 minutes. Sit back in your chair and relax, and enjoy the experience. Don't turn it on yet. Wait till everyone's ready. And we might want to, I don't know if we want to turn those lights down, or can we do that?
Anybody bring any incense?
Yeah.
Sage.
Is everyone ready? Everyone ready to start? Yes? Okay, turn it on. Let's go. Where it worked. Anybody sleeping? Where? Who fell asleep? What? What?
Heard some snoring.
Yeah, did you? Anybody got any feedback on the tapes? Was it generally a pleasant experience for everyone? Yeah. Your hand is numb? Yeah, these are really nice tapes in terms of, I mean, not only are they effective if you use them for the purpose for which they were intended, but you can also use them as just a general relaxation tape. As a matter of fact, how are you guys doing anyway? Does everyone want to go for another, let's say, half an hour, 45 minutes, or? Okay, good. Okay.
Oh, he said we're wide awake now.
Yeah, right. Great. Okay, good. What's that? What was that, John? I didn't hear that.
Oh, that's the wake up.
Every time you say 11, we have to send more money in there.
Okay, I'm in section 5, but I'm going to go right to page. I'm going to go right to page 4. No, right to page 3.
Page 3 at the beginning of the book?
No, page 3 in section 5. Right at the bottom of the page where it says using the Monroe tapes to neutralize your trading fears. Since we've just done this, you just listen to the tape. I'll go right into how this works. The way you're going to do this is when you, well, you see, you haven't got the function command yet. Maybe we ought to do this tomorrow. No, I take that back. We'll do it tomorrow. I'm sorry.
Go to section 6.
Yeah, really. Problem is, I don't feel like getting into this right now. Hold on. What? No, hold on. That's all right. Hold on. Let me.
I'll make some comments about the self-hypnosis tapes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've done a lot of work in that area.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, go ahead.
Take
You to notice that you weren't following your normal routine. How many days, weeks, or months?
I don't know, it's been a year, it's been a process, you know, where it's been a challenge to make any money. It's not the market, it's in me.
Okay, so what we're going to learn, there's a particular, just a real simple meditation technique that we're going to do tomorrow. That will, if you practice this around 10 or 15 minutes a day, what it'll do, it'll help you become an objective observer to your own stream of thoughts, so that you can start to notice when you're not doing, or when you're not thinking, or when you're thinking, saying, or doing something that's inconsistent with your goal, so that you're not unconscious of this moment-to-moment endeavor for of how we're creating our lives and the choices that we're making. Because if you want to be a consistently successful trader, then what you want to do is collapse the amount of time that it takes for you to notice that you're not doing something that's consistent with your objective of becoming consistent. And hopefully, by doing this kind of exercise we're going to do tomorrow, what it'll do is it'll collapse the amount of time that it takes for you to notice that to virtually instantaneous. That you're aware that let's say your distracting thought, because anything that you do that deviates from what your objective is a distraction, right? Well, doing is the last step. The first step is always a thought. You're going to think about it before you do it. You might even run something through your mind. You might even talk about it with somebody. But it's first going to be triggered by a distracting thought. Now, if you really want to become consistent, what you want to do is be able to catch yourself in the thought. Catch yourself at the point where the thought and the awareness of the distracting thought are virtually simultaneous. Instead of it taking, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or looking back days, weeks, or months later, saying, hey, you know what? I'm not doing what I know works. That's basically even what you were saying. You're not doing what you know works.
Yeah. And I'd add one other thing, because you mentioned it yesterday. And I don't remember in what context. I used to keep track of every day before I started trading. I'd write down a number from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. And it was rate yourself on how you feel that day.
Right.
And if you feel like you're an 8 or a 9 or an 85 or a 95, and if a trade comes along, have the courage when you're at the higher end of the scale to put it on and go for it. Don't hesitate as much. And if you feel like maybe you're a 3 or a 4, put the trade on, but don't go balls out on it.
Or scale back.
Yeah,
in other words, it's a rating system to use money. You can use in conjunction with money management, so that if you, let's say, you normally might trade 3,000 shares, if you rate yourself a 10, then you're going to trade 3,000, or maybe even a little bit more if you get a real primo signal.
Yeah.
But if you're rating yourself as a 5 that day, then you know what? You want to scale back proportionally. You might only trade 1,500. You might only trade 1,000.
Yeah.
Because what it really gets down to is like at least what I had before, is that if you're not in the most ideal, if this is positive and this is negative, okay, and you're not in this most ideal state of mind to be trading, because that's what it really boils down to, and that's really essentially what you were talking about. Is he was rating, he learned, or at least he involved himself in a system where he was basically gauging or rating his state of mind. In essence, his capacity to make money, or his capacity to make money in the sense of how clearly am I going to be able to perceive the market and how well am I going to execute my trades. And in advance, he's saying, you know what, I'm a 6 today. And you can learn to do this, and you can learn to be honest with yourself about it. And as a result, have your money management, in other words, the amount of size that you put on, correspond with how you're rating yourself.
In that scenario, would you also take a moment, say 45 minutes or an hour into the market, to rate what the market's doing to make sure that you're in conjunction?
Oh, you could, sure. Yeah, you could let the market define itself. And not trade the open,
Well,
let it go.
You're a 9 in the market too.
And the market's a what?
2.
Oh, I don't know what you mean then. I misunderstood. You mean in terms of symmetry? In other words, if you're going to rate the market in terms of symmetry? Is that what you're saying?
If you're trying to determine what your strength is as of that morning,
Uh-huh.
in either mental clarity, physical clarity, whatever it is, on a
Right.
scale of 1 to 10,
Right.
wouldn't it also make sense at some point after you've seen the way, not trading the open or not trading, just somewhere in that first hour, determine what your opinion of the market is that day on a scale of 1 to 10 to make sure they're in sync? Because if you're trading at a 9 but the market's reacting at a 2,
Not really. I'm not really.
There's-
Yeah.
How are you trading the market?
Sometimes, maybe you can put me to mistake. Sometimes I have a very strong, I feel that I know what the market is doing. I feel
Yes.
confident about that. Maybe that's.
Is that what you're
going
saying?
today.
Is that you felt confident about how the market's unfolding, and yet the market isn't unfolding that way? Is that what you're saying, or? Because look at it this way, John. Even if, whatever assessment that you might have about the way the market's going to unfold, okay? Whatever assessment you might have about that or what the potential is, even if the market isn't doing what you thought, isn't that significant? So when you look at it that way, it's like,
and you'd see it sooner if you were trading at an 8 or 9 as compared to.
exactly, okay?
It's all
So,
into it.
yeah, so it's like you could say, hey, what's significant? Is the market following, the projected symmetry? And if it is, that's great, but if it isn't, that's telling you something too, isn't it?
Right.
And you're also going to get signals, you can also get a lot of signals out of that. You get sometimes more signals about what it's not doing in relationship to these significant reference points of symmetry as opposed to what it is doing.
All would agree that we don't know what the market's going to do anyway.
What's that?
we
We don't
agree?
have to know. Well, we're kind of mixing. We're kind of mixing it. We might, mixing it a little bit in the sense that it depends on the context in which we're trading. If we're trading mechanically, all this kind of discussion would be irrelevant. If we're trading subjectively, it's not. It's just like, for an example, if you're trading mechanically, you're going to have a predefined, a definite predefined entry point where the variables are specific. There's no subjectivity whatsoever in terms of, the conditions under which you enter the market. Those variables are either present or they're not. It's black or white. They are present or they are not present. If they are present, you're obligated and committed to enter into a trade. If they aren't present, then you do nothing. But when you evolve into the subjective stage of trading, then you can use anything you've ever learned about the nature of the market to generate a signal to get in or out. So for an example, what we're talking about, Roman, is that in the mechanical stage of trading, let's say for an example, the market's doing this and you've got a stop down here. You entered the market long right here at this point, okay? At this point right here, and your stop is down here. If you're trading mechanically, you can't do anything with that stop, meaning that the market, your market either goes in your favor, stops you out, and that's all there is to it. Either or. If you're trading subjectively, if the market, let's make it a little bit easier to illustrate if I made more distance, but if you're trading subjectively, if the market's trading around in this area and as a result of the kind of patterns that it might be producing, you could say, you know what, I don't need to keep that stop in the market. I'm going to pull it and either move it up, move it further down based on your assessment of what's happening now. See, in the subjective stage of trading, you can do that. You can even get out before you get stopped out, even if it wouldn't have stopped you out otherwise. In the subjective stage of trading, if you make that assessment of what the market's telling you in that moment, that's all right. Did you see the difference?
I see the difference.
In the subjective stage of trading, you can do anything you want under any conditions that you want. If you put a stop in the market, you want to take the stop out, then take it out. You want to move it, then move it. In the mechanical stage of trading, there's no discretion whatsoever.
Starting to change the rules.
What's that?
Are you then changing the rules?
Yeah, you can't-
Going from mechanical to subjective.
Yeah, in other words, you're either one stage or the other. If you're trading in mechanical stage, you can't change your rules in the middle of a sample size. You can only change your rules after the end of a sample size. So whatever you determine your sample size of trades to be, whether it's going to be like 20 trades or 25 trades, you are committed to take all 20 trades. You can't change anything in the middle or until you're done. But when when you've moved into the subjective stage of trading, I'm assuming that you won't do so until you have worked through whatever resistance you may have to thinking in probabilities. When you've worked through all that resistance and you're confident that you've learned to think in probabilities, then there's no reason why you have to continue to trade mechanically unless you want to, or unless you know that you have, let's say, a plethora of self-sabotaging beliefs that you don't want to get into, you don't really want to do anything about. Then what you do is you stay in the mechanical stage so that you can make a clear distinction between what you need to do based on your methodology and what your mind may be telling you to do based on the fact that you've accumulated too much money and you might start sabotaging yourself. Because at least in the mechanical stage of trading, you can make a clear distinction between what you need to do in any given moment and what you can't do. Whereas in the subjective stage of trading, that line is really blurred. And it is very easy for self-sabotaging beliefs to enter into the equation. Okay? You get the difference? So other than that, if you guys have any questions, because I'm not going to give I just don't want to do it. I'd rather do it tomorrow morning. What? Well, what stories you want? What do you know?
Trading.
Well,
What was your best day?
Well, there's probably one of the most interesting traders that I ever worked with was in the bond pit, and I worked with him for quite a while, and I'll give you something. I'll give you an example of when I said that it's your state of mind that'll determine your results as opposed to the amount of time that you expose yourself to the market or the opportunities. You could say that, I mean, this guy, he loved to trade, and he was back in the early 90s, one of the biggest traders in the bond pit. I don't know if you know his name or not if I said it, but he wasn't as big as Baldwin. But there would be times, his largest position he'd put on would be about 5,000 contracts, futures contracts, but his normal position was between 300 and 500 contracts. So one contract in Treasury bond futures, a one tick move, the smallest incremental move in Treasury bond futures is worth $31.25. So 100 contracts would be $3,125 or $33,125, and 500 contracts would be over $15,000. So his normal, let's say if you put on 500 contracts, his normal position between 300 and 500, one incremental change in price was worth about 15 grand in or out of his account. And the bonds, especially back then, they could easily move 10 ticks in a matter of seconds. So you're talking $150,000. And you could easily be subjected to 8 to 10 tick price vacuums, either for or against you. So you're talking $150,000 in a matter of moments. And like I said, there were times where he put on thousands of contracts, not just hundreds. So,
Was he a scale trader?
Scale trader?
Did he scale into his positions, his differentiation from scaling out?
Well, sometimes he'd take on the whole pit practically. Okay. And it was, I had many other clients in the bond pit who watched him and said that there were times it would be like watching Michael Jordan trade bonds. He was good. He was really good. And it was also that he just loved what he was doing. He loved being there every moment. It was hard for him to leave. And And he really didn't give a shit about the money. And the money was truly irrelevant to him. In fact, out of all the people I've ever worked with in my life, I've never met anybody who was on the extreme, I mean, way over here in terms of how little money meant. Just didn't matter. But he had other problems. When I met him, it was in May of 1992. He had a real bad day. Someone he ran into had come to one of my workshops and said that he should call me. He did. We had an appointment. Didn't really, in fact, we had a couple of appointments, and not really much happened. He just, you know, I tried to explain some of this material to him, and he wasn't really into it or even grasping it for that matter. So I didn't hear from him for another couple of months, and I actually didn't hear from him at all. I heard from his wife, who called me. I never even met her, and she called me and she was hysterical because he was gonna have to mortgage the house because of a bad day that he had. And when I met him in May of that year, 1992, he had approximately $10 million flow in and out of his account from January until May. That's the kind of swings that he was on, okay? $10 million in and out like this, okay? The most he'd ever accumulated at the end of any given year was about $600,000. That's the most he's ever been able to keep up to that point anyway. So she was really hysterical and wanted to know what I was going to do to, you know, fix her husband. And I wasn't even really working with him. And so we started working together on a real consistent basis, virtually every day. And that was in July of '92. And so from July of '92 until the end of December, he had $5.5 million. And then he went on vacation with his wife, and on vacation bought this book called The Coming Collapse of either the Bond Market or the Interest Rate Market, and bought into the concepts in the book. And from when he got back off from vacation that year, bond market was in one of the biggest rallies that it ever sustained of all time, and every day he was going in thinking the market was going to collapse based on what he read in this book. That wasn't an accident, by the way, in terms of everything else that was going on in his life. And by the middle of March of 1993, he was so desperate over the fact that he'd lost just about half of the $5.5 million. He was down to about $2.2 million. And I was telling him virtually every day, because we were talking almost every day, sometimes for an hour a day. You know, this is the way you need to think. This is what you need to do. This is how you fix the situation. He just wasn't listening until one day he called up and he said, "Okay, I'll do anything." And he meant it. I'll do anything. And so, and I said, "Here's what you've got to do. I've noticed that you're capable of staying properly focused about a half an hour a day. That's it. And so if you want to fix the problem, you only get to trade a half an hour a day."
What was his first response?
Well, that was really tough because he just loved doing it. And it wasn't just a matter of him loving to be in that pit because of the way of life that it provided him. It was like there's a work ethic in the futures pits. There really is. I mean, it's like where you stand in that pit is very important. There are territorial constraints and territorial, let's say, dynamics involved, because if you're not in your spot and you're not in your spot all day long, it means someone else is going to take that spot, and these guys do get into territorial wars all the time. I mean, I've worked with traders who get into these territory wars about where they want to stand, and each one of them gets there, like 10 minutes earlier every day until they're like getting there 3 or 3:30 in the morning, until one of them eventually gives up. And they go through this a lot. I mean, this is not uncommon at all. They're basically got this range war going for this one little square foot of where to stand. So there wasn't just that. It was also the work ethic. In other words, when you trade, when you have access to order flow. In other words, the kind of order flow that's coming from off the floor. A lot of that order flow is not really trading. It's virtually free money. Do you know what I mean by free money? It's riskless. That's really what most of the locals in the pit are looking for. They're looking for the riskless free money. In essence, what you're doing is that, and they're not always legal trades, by the way, because all trades are supposed to be open outcry. But what if you're standing next to a floor broker that has access to order flow of both buys and sells, and there are market orders coming into the pit, and there's a spread of 1 to 2 ticks between, the bids and the offers. Well, if I've got an order to buy 100 contracts at the market, and the bid is 08, and the offer is 10. Well, I'm going to be selling them. I'm going to be selling them or buying them at the bid and selling them at the offer to my buddy standing next to me. Now that's a 2-tick spread on 100 contracts. You just made 200 ticks. Was there any risk? Because he's going to take the other side of both orders. All you got to do is card it up. His buddy's okay. Card it up 100. Okay, you bought 100 at 8. You sold them at 10. Where's the risk? See, that's not trading. That's just basically free money. Now you got to pay a price to get into those situations. It's not as easy as you think, because the guys that are controlling that kind of order flow, they expect favors in return. It's just not that simple. But you name it. You name it. It's an extreme environment. You name it. Anything your imagination can think of was about what it entails. But anyway, but it's not just that. It's not that. And I'm not saying, even implying that he had access to a lot of those trades. He really didn't even need that, because he was really just a good trader in terms of his ability to be able to perceive, where the direction of the market was and what he needed to do.
Was there a particular time that he traded?
Oh, I'm going to get into that. Okay, and that's really part of the whole story. As a matter of fact, it's an important part of it. In that, like I said, he loved being down there. He loved doing what he was doing, but at the same time, his ability to remain properly focused was about a half an hour at the very outside. The rest of the day, he was just all over the place. So, and you got to keep in mind one thing: when you're trading at a level where each tick might be worth $15,000 or more, it doesn't take much to screw up. Now you're standing in a pit. You've got literally, I don't know how many guys can stand in the bond pit, over 1,000, I think. And they're all screaming. They're all in close proximity to one another. They're jostling with themselves. They're screaming in your ears. You're getting pencils poked in your body, your face, or whatever. There's all kinds of bodily smells going on. There are guys who do not want you to make money, okay, and will purposefully distract you. There's a lot of things that the order fillers do to suck people into a trade, big locals, to take the other side of a trade, where they know for a fact that that someone's going to hit the market with a huge bid or offer they're sucking you basically what they virtually know is a losing trade. So, and not only that, it's like, if you're in one of these trades and there are bids and offers that you're leaning against to get in or out of a position, and let's say you're in a position and there are bids and offers available that you can hit to, let's say, get out of a trade, out of a 500 lot trade at a 2 or 3 tick profit, and then all of a sudden, just someone says, hey, and you turn your head and those bids or offers disappear. And next thing you know, there might be 2 or 3 ticks lower. Now you're looking at a scratch where you had like on a 500 lot trade, you had 1,500 ticks available to you. Now you've got 0. You're going to scratch a trade, or you're going to think you're going to get your 3 ticks back, okay? Or now it's 1 tick against you. Now you got 500 ticks against. Now you got a 500 tick loss, 1,000 tick loss, 1,500 tick loss. Yeah. Okay. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And you're thinking about, if I just hit that damn bid for the 3 tick profit. Okay, all it takes is just this momentary, that's all it takes. And so his ability to stay completely focused in what he needed to do and when he needed to do it, like I said, was about a half an hour a day. And so that's what I said. You want to stop this, then just trade a half an hour a day and find something else to do with the rest of your day. And he was so desperate that he did it. No, wait a minute. Go ahead.
Most people to stay at that level, it's just your body's working on it's such extreme sense of awareness that it is hard for a lot of people.
Oh yes. Oh, absolutely.
Longer than that.
Oh, absolutely. It would be the equivalent. The kind of stuff that he did was equivalent to if you can imagine being in the 7th game of an NBA playoff. Okay, the score is tied and there's 1 minute left.
Right.
Okay, you're talking intense.
Every day.
Yeah, it is every day, right? This is every day, all day long. Intense. So, and in trading in the zone, there's an analogy that I use where it's like someone building a bridge over the Grand Canyon. Okay, like when you're trading just one futures contract, you build a bridge over the Grand Canyon. It's like, okay, the bridge is, the bridge could be as wide as this room. What's the possibility? What are the possibilities? I'm going to walk over this bridge, I'm going to fall off. Even if I'm staggering. Okay, it's like I got a lot of room, a big margin for error, right? Now I could fall off, and next stop is a mile down. But as you start trading in higher volume, meaning that as your contract size grows, that bridge, the equivalent of that bridge, basically narrows to the point where you're trading 500, 1,000, 2,000 contracts. You're basically on a tightrope. Okay, now you're on a tightrope over Grand Canyon. And what does it take to knock you off? Well, if you're on the tightrope over Grand Canyon, it could take just not even a very hard breeze, but a relatively gentle breeze might cause you to lose your balance and fall off. That gentle breeze in the pit is the equivalent of one distracting thought. That's it, just one distracting thought. He went ahead and did this. And he said, well, what half an hour of the day should I trade? And I said, you'll find it won't make any difference. Pick any half an hour that you want. Because regardless of what half an hour it is, regardless of how much volume is available in that half an hour that you pick, whether it's a lot or whether it's a little, based on your ability to trade and the fact that you're trading, that you know that you only get a half an hour to do this, and you have the skills to do it, and the fact that you have maximum focus going into it, you will extract the maximum amount, whatever it is, in that half an hour. So it won't make a difference. It just won't. He didn't believe that. He really didn't. He found out that it was true. It did not make a difference. He averaged, while he did this, he averaged $180,000 a day, almost every day, for just a half an hour. Changed the whole character of the bond pit. The whole character of the bond pit, because all these other people in the bond pit who are there grinding it out all day long are watching him stroll in, stay a half an hour, and walk out with a whole boatload of money. And they're thinking, hey, what am I doing? Now go ahead and ask your question.
How do you maintain his position? Meaning his 1 square foot.
It really wasn't a problem. Just the fact that he was a half an hour. They just he was such, because of his stature, they stepped aside.
It's a pecking order.
Yeah, it's a pecking order, right?
Was he able to keep his profits after a while?
Well, he ended up in a really one of the bitterest divorce proceedings you could imagine, and his wife actually got him enjoined from even going into the pit. He couldn't even trade for almost 2.5 years.
Wow. Oh, because she didn't want him to lose the money.
That's right. Well, they spent it all on attorneys anyway, so it didn't make any difference.
I've seen a guy, his wife used to come up at 9:15 in the morning, and they were going through they had problems, and eventually had to work, just rag. The guy just kept
Nice way to start the
trading,
day.
and it had an effect,
How could it not?
Yeah, you think his wife would, and he'd say, don't call me now. And hang up on people at times. I can't talk, bye.
There you
They
go.
understand.
No. I did that once.
Go ahead, John.
Do you ever get traders that are trading well that then come to you? No.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I know what you're saying, yeah, right.
If A is, Wayne Dyer talks about this, says A is perfect health, and B is where we live, and C is death. Most of us go see a doctor when we're at C to get back to B.
Right.
Very rarely are we at B happy or pleased or satisfied and take the step to get to A to a higher level.
I get two kind of traders. Okay? Or I don't really do much of this anymore, but I used to get two kinds of traders. The ones who were really successful and just wanted to become more successful, and the ones who were in a state of absolute desperation. Everyone in between, pretty much no.
If someone's trading at the high end of that, is there more room?
Oh, there's always more room, absolutely.
So are you looking at their behaviors and finding out that they're successful in spite of some negatives, so if we pull the negatives out?
Sure, absolutely, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But you can't see it as a trader until someone observes the patterns.
It's difficult unless you've acquired the kind of skills that, you know, would take a long time to acquire. It's a lot easier for someone else to, you know, to spot it. It's difficult to do even with the skills. When you the kind of self-analysis that you're talking about, it's still, it can be difficult, you know, to do on your own. Some of the beliefs that we have are so entrenched and create such create these kind of closed loops that are really difficult to see into on our own, because our lives are in a pattern that is so self-evident that it's almost inconceivable that we could even question the pattern, because it's been a pattern that's existed all our lives. So therefore, it is a fabric of reality instead of just something that I learned and I'm perpetuating it over and over and over again. Is the guy on the tape, does he have a real rough voice?
I think it's the same.
It sounds like him.
Is it Bob Monroe?
It sounded like an old.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then
it sounded like an old dude.
and at the end of the tape, wake up! Does he do that?
No.
Oh, he doesn't?
Fortunately, he doesn't do that. I'd be kind of panicked. You're all mellow.
That wouldn't be very nice.
Get up, Pledge.
Well, the tapes that I used to listen to, is what he did.
I'm glad you didn't give us
Wake up! Wake up! Yeah, really, yeah, really. It seemed like it anyway. I mean, you know, you're in this kind of deep, real quiet space, and you know. Oh.
So how do you, if you want to buy one of those other tapes?
Well, I gave you the catalog.
No, but there's no price list, there's no place.
Oh, there isn't? Oh, just call them up. You get, look, we're distributors, you can call us. We don't really, I mean, that's not something we do. I mean, we'll order them for you, but you can order them direct.
Okay.
Right from
I'm
the.
just kinda wondering, you know.
Yeah, no, it's no problem. I thought there were, the catalog included price lists. I'm not, the tapes aren't very expensive. I don't really remember how much they are, but I think they're like, I don't know, maybe $20 or $25 or something, or I don't know.
Just, here's the prices for those.
Yeah. And that's not the only, I mean, they have a number of different types of tapes to do a number of different things. Some would be considered pretty bizarre, but, and I've been down there as part of their professional group a couple of times, and for a whole week with other people in other industries. Mostly, I would say, people in the psychiatric industry that use their products. And they get together and talk about, you know, how the products can improve and you know, other uses for them, and just, you know, sharing a lot of ideas. It was mostly like a summer camp for adults, basically, is what it really amounted to. It was really a lot of fun. Well, let's kind of review from yesterday. We went through a lot of material yesterday, and we're going to go through a lot again today. Anybody got any comments or ideas about some of the stuff that we talked about yesterday? And everybody's really just just at peace with all this and ready to go, huh? Go ahead. Go ahead, John.
No, I think if you know, on the way home, if you think outside the box, you know, I came here with different agendas other than trading. Is what I challenge myself with every day, trying to think outside the box, how to look in the mirror and become better. And if you take the time to do that, and you have the courage to actually look in the mirror and look deep, I mean, some of that stuff yesterday was life-changing. And you're just not going to get that. I mean, you just to get access to that information with yourself. Just if you're open to it, they can take a wound and heal it immediately.
That's right. Absolutely. I mean, we're going to get into in just a little bit what I call like a practical philosophy for change, and just a real practical way of looking at why consciously altering ourselves and changing ourselves and adapting ourselves can be so rewarding, because I think it's really one of the keys to happiness. But it does, you know, the fundamental component is what John just said. A willingness to think. A willingness to think, what he, as he referred to as outside the box, but basically just a willingness to think. Because nothing constricts what we can think about. Nothing. Only one thing. Let's put it this way. Nothing can limit what we can think about except for one thing. And what is that?
Beliefs.
What?
Beliefs.
Nope.
Fear.
Fear, which would mean which would mean what? What are the implications of lack of fear? Or what are the implications of a fear of thinking in a certain direction?
Because you limit yourself to things, you're not open to all the data that's available to you.
Okay, well, I was just thinking like just a lack of willingness. That's the only thing. No desire.
Lack of desire.
Yeah. Because that's really what it takes. That's what all of this takes. It all boils down to, what do you want? What are you willing to focus your energy on with conviction? Because regardless of what technique you're comfortable with, if you choose to go through a process of transformation, it really doesn't matter what technique you use. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. I mean, it can matter if you're using it inappropriately and you don't know what you're doing. But technique is not as critical as desire. So there's really only one thing that stops anybody from thinking outside of what they've learned to believe. And that's a lack of willingness. Correspondingly, all it takes to tap into creative or inspirational information is a willingness, desire. If the desire is genuine, you'll get the information. That's an absolute fact. It really is. And I know maybe for some people who you know might not have experienced this or experienced it on a regular basis, that's all it really takes, is a genuine, sincere desire. And if you try it and you don't get the information or don't get any information, then I would say that your desire was not genuine and sincere. It's what would commonly be referred to as lip service. You're saying the right words, but you know, the sincere energy isn't behind the words. And that's really what it takes.
Along that same line though, if you've never had change in your life to where you can see an A-B situation, to actually put yourself to think that it could change is a huge gap.
It really is, yes.
But once you find someone that actually gets that A-B and can say, I was a different person yesterday, I had a different thought process yesterday, if that accelerates, you can have just a dynamic curve straight up.
Oh, yeah.
It's just that first huge step that makes all the other steps far along the way.
Right. Yeah, good point, John. I would say those kind of changes, those kind of first step changes for me came in years. Years.
Yeah.
But you know, that was a long time ago, and didn't have access to the kind of insight and material that's available today too. Or let's say it was available but not readily accessible like today. Put it that way. Things have changed a lot in the last 20 and 30 years. They really have. I mean, when I was writing The Disciplined Trader back in, starting in 1982 and dissecting the dynamics of beliefs and belief systems and things like that, I mean, at the time I thought I was really way out there and really afraid to even share the material with people because I thought they'd think I was crazy. Really, I'm serious. Especially the trading community.
I see that all the time. Not all the time as much, but there's a certain degree of people I've come across over the years as traders who kind of think that this aspect of learning about yourself and thinking that that's going to help you as a trader is a little bit unmanly, I think, is the way that most people think about
Oh, sure. And not as much now as what it used to be.
Right.
I mean, but certainly back in, when I was working predominantly with floor traders in Chicago, back in the 80s, I mean, I would say the vast majority of floor traders looked at Mark Douglas like, whoa, get away. I've spoken at conferences. There was the first conference I actually spoke at. Tim Slater invited me to speak at CompuTrack in 1980, April of 1983 or 1984, I don't remember. And down in New Orleans, and it was kind of amazing how the chain of events occurred to even me getting that invitation in the first place, because it was just really bizarre circumstances. Or synchronicities that were really that were kind of mind-boggling to me. But anyway, I was invited to go down there to speak, and one of the and at the time, I mean, I had no credentials at all. I had nothing. I really did. I had absolutely no credentials to be doing what I was doing. But Tim, and it was all really just based on a conversation that Tim and I had at dinner. And I just happened to sit down next to him because some woman broke a date with me, and or I wouldn't have even been at that particular banquet. And she broke this date. I was waiting for her, and I happened to sit down next to Tim Slater. Didn't even know who he was, and we talked. And then I found out later on that he did these conferences, and thought, well, since I was working on the psychology of trading and he had technical analysis, let's put the two together and do a workshop or something. Well, when I called him up, and he said, well, yeah, I'm doing a conference, and he said, well, think about maybe adding you to the schedule. I'm thinking, oh man, so he called me back like 2 or 3 days later, and he said, okay, you're on. And from that moment on, this was like January. And the conference was in April, and from that moment on, I mean, I just obsessed over this presentation. I mean, totally and completely. I scrutinized it. Sometimes it might have taken me a week to get a sentence. I mean, literally, I'd go over, just over and over and over again. So when I got down there, I mean, it would be a huge understatement to say I was really, really nervous. There were 850 people at that conference, and there were probably, I don't know, maybe 18 or 19 speakers or something like that. And of course all the other speakers, they'd written books and all that kind of stuff, and had reputations. And so Tim had a general meeting for everyone the first day of the conference in the morning. It was like, I think around 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that, before everyone started. And one of the first surprising things that I found that when I got down there is that Tim had me speaking like either 6 or 7 times in a 3-day period, and all the other speakers were only speaking like twice. I'm thinking, well, there's got to be a mistake here, and I didn't want to say anything to Tim, and I'm thinking there were some things that just weren't adding up. One, the number of times he had me speaking. 2, the material that I had submitted for the the big book that you get when you go to these conferences wasn't in the book. And it wasn't much material, but because I didn't really have any material, but it wasn't in the book anyway, and it was just in the packet. In other words, you get one of these huge satchels and the books in there, and my stuff is separate. So I'm sitting in the middle of the audience listening to Tim talk about some of the restaurants to go to in New Orleans. In fact, I think it was even. Was it Mardi Gras? No, it wasn't Mardi Gras. Anyway, what to do in New Orleans and what to watch out for, and be careful of this or whatever. And then he said, and then he did this disclaimer thing about what the speakers say, CompuTrack has no legal liability and all this kind of good stuff. And then he said, but I want you to pay particular attention. I'm just sitting in this chair, right? So I want you to pay particular attention to this material that we didn't put in the book specifically because we want you to pay particular attention to Mark Douglas. And I'm like, and I'm just like, my heart almost exploded. It really did. I was like, what the hell is going on? And I mean, I didn't even hear the rest of what he said because it just freaked me out. So I had to speak not really too much longer after that, maybe 2 or 3 hours after that, and I'm thinking this whole time that I'm down there, or before all this, that okay, nobody knows who I am. It's like psychology of trading, not something that people are even paying much attention to. How many people might end up in one of my sessions, right? 5 or 10 people. Okay, I can make an ass out of myself in front of 5 or 10 people. It's all right. Okay, I can do that. And so I'm standing in front of this door where where the sign says Mark Douglas, Psychology of Trading. And I'm talking to another one of the speakers. I don't remember his name. And he was just, he was being real nice. And when I say that sweat was literally dripping off my hands, I am not exaggerating. It was dripping off my hands. And I'm even getting nervous even talking about it. I mean, it's just, but the memory of going back into that experience is putting me back into that experience, in that state of mind. So we're talking, and I'm watching people kind of stream into this room, and I'm getting upset. I mean, I'm watching people walk into this room. I'm standing, maybe 10 or 15 feet away from the door, and I'm thinking, why are they doing this to me? Why? No, why are they doing this to me? And I don't understand it. And I'm, I kind of glance in the room. There's like maybe 70 or 80 people in there, and I'm really pissed. I'm thinking, come on. I wouldn't go listen to me talk. Why are they going to listen to me talk? And so the other speaker left because he had a session himself. So I was standing there by myself, and it was a real defining moment in my life, because I was more than seriously considering bolting. No, I was going to bolt. I really was. I was standing there thinking to myself, I knew this would be it. I knew that Tim would never ever invite me back to another conference. I mean, that's what I was contemplating at that point, whether I could accept the deep sense of regret that I would experience by bolting, and what I was going to say to Tim. And I was running it through my mind, and just like checking the probability out. And like I said, it was I don't know if 50-50, 60-40, whatever, in terms of 60 in terms of bolting. But just at this right moment, I mean, like I said, this defining moment as to whether or not I was literally going to run, this person came up to me, and someone was going to walk into the room. He walked over to me. He saw the name tag, and he says, "Oh," he said, "You're Mark Douglas, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, shouldn't we get going?" And I said, "Okay." And I walked into the room, and it was really weird, because once I walked into the room, and because they didn't have anybody introducing you or anything else like that. It was just, you just did it on your own. Once I walked into the room and got in front of everybody, I was fine. And not only that, I didn't even use my presentation. I just spoke spontaneously off the top of my head. And I had to, because that first presentation was a little bit shorter than the 2-hour presentation that I prepared for. Well, anyway, I did a really good job, and did such a good job that the next time that I spoke, there were like even more people in the room. And then by Saturday afternoon, this was on Friday, by Saturday afternoon, I literally almost had the whole conference in the room. They were lined up around the walls and out the door. And I mean, it's just, and there was the same people that were coming to these presentations over and over and over again. And I was just like, I was really astounded, absolutely astounded. Until Sunday morning, I was in an elevator with somebody, and then I figured out what was going on. Like, what was this phenomenon? And some guy, he looked at me and said, "Oh, you're Mark Douglas. You're the guy that's making us all feel good." Now, that was not my intent for my presentation. But I mean, that wasn't the goal of my presentation. But as it turned out, I was giving people information about the nature of trading that they never ever heard before, meaning that there isn't anything wrong with you. Because back in the early 80s, especially futures traders, everyone lied about their results. Everyone was losing, literally everyone was losing, and everyone was saying that they were winning. And so all the people that were saying to their friends, oh yeah, I'm doing great, but they were losing their ass, and their friends were saying, oh yeah, I'm doing great too, they all thought it was just them that was lying. They didn't know that everyone else was lying too. And so, and because I had worked at Merrill Lynch, and I saw how virtually everyone, and I worked at one of Merrill Lynch's biggest offices in Chicago, I had access to the printouts of their customer base, where I could say that 99% of all their customers were losing money, and I said that in the conference. I mean, I just said that to everybody. It's like I just lifted this huge weight off their shoulders to think, okay, there's nothing wrong with me, and there are specific reasons why I'm losing. And so as a result, everyone wanted to hear this presentation over and over and over again. Now the next year when I went back, and Tim invited me back to speak, I thought, okay, this is really good. What I'll do is I'll really give them the meat. Okay, I'll instead of, because that first one I didn't really get into a lot of depth. So I said, okay, I'll really put together a presentation and give them some real substance. I would say the first presentation that I did, I had probably 300 people in the room, and I lost 200 of them in the first 20 minutes. And it's been like that ever since. So, Dave, when you're talking about people, and I have found it really, the industry, the industry is evolving. Back in the early 80s, this message just was not very well received at all, especially if there was any depth to it. But, things are changing a lot. They really are. There was, which reminds me of the very first time I ever did a 2-day workshop. It was sometime in the late 80s, not the late 80s, maybe 1986 or 1987. I was doing 1-day workshops, but I'd never expanded it to a 2-day. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll expand it to 2 days. And I had probably 11 or 12 guys in the room, and they were mostly all floor traders. Actually, mostly all from the S&P pit at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And so it just so happened it was in October, in the weekend where you have to turn your clocks back. And I'd forgotten all about that because, I was preoccupied with the workshop. And so I got there, I got to the workshop about a half an hour early. And of course, nobody's there. And I think it was supposed to start at 8 or 9 o'clock. And at the time it was supposed to start, nobody's there. It's just like, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I really did it this time. Nobody's coming. Until somebody finally showed up and I figured out that I didn't do my clock, so, So, see, the thing is, and what this all really gets down to is something that we talked about Friday night and yesterday, is that you still don't need to have any of this to put on a winning trade. That's the whole point. None of this is necessary to put on a winning trade. None of this is necessary to put on 2 winning trades or 3 winning trades. But eventually what we all find out is that we can put on winning trades. But there's a huge difference between being able to, or let's say, getting a few winning trades here and there, or even on a consistent, a fairly consistent basis. There's a huge difference between that and, of course, and what your bottom line results are when you experience huge drawdowns or a series of drawdowns as a result of mental errors. And when you become dissatisfied with that, you start looking for something to remedy the situation. And that's what takes a lot of work. Because, like we've been saying all along, it has everything to do with the way you think and in essence, the way you live your life.
Just so I'm clear on kind of where we're probably going to be going today, I think the essence of what we were trying to bring out up until this point was getting comfortable with the whole notion that it's your belief structure that may be limiting you in whatever aspect of your life, or perhaps more specifically your trading. I'm under the impression that what we're going to try to do today is that we're going to try to not only identify those beliefs, but also work on patterns or work on techniques to neutralize them or redirect the energy, however you want to phrase
Exactly,
it.
right. That's exactly what we're going to do today. Remember that the kind of problems that we face as traders are going to fall into pretty much two basic categories in terms of what's going on inside of us. We have a like genetically encoded ways of thinking, meaning our minds are wired to think in certain ways that cause us to believe that what we're experiencing in this now moment is identical to something that's already in our minds as a memory. That's a problem. Because we know what's the reality of the situation. What's true, what's really true. Every moment is unique. And see, because of our mind's inherent, propensity to associate, it's that mechanism that we have to compensate for. So we have to do something specific to compensate for that mechanism. That's one of the things we need to do. Because the reality is, every moment is truly unique. That is the truth. Our minds make it seem as if this moment can be identical to something I've already experienced. Sometimes there'll be a correspondence, okay? There will be enough of a correspondence that we'll experience some degree of satisfaction based on what decision we make, because our minds associated this now moment, this unique moment, with some memory that we have. But as traders, there's too much of a capability. I mean, there's too much of a potential, let's say, to make catastrophic errors by allowing this mechanism to cause us to think that we know what's going to happen next. See, so what we want to do is take that gap away between the reality of each moment being unique and what our memories say, and say, you know what? I need to install a mechanism in my mind that will not let me think that this moment is anything other than unique. That's what we're doing. I need to install a mechanism in my mind that will not allow me to believe or think that this moment is anything other than unique. That way my mind is now open to receive anything that may be of relevance in terms of what could satisfy my desires or goals. So that I can make a decision based on all the information that's available, not just what might satisfy my expectations. And remember, my expectations are going to be what? Based on what? What are my expectations always based on? Well, beliefs. Yeah. Because an expectation is a belief projected out into some future moment. So that's exactly what we don't want as traders. We do not want to be basing our decisions on our expectations, because when our expectations are fulfilled, we feel satisfied and happy. And that's something that we all desire. And when our expectations go unfulfilled, we experience emotional pain. This is a universal characteristic of humans. Probably of anything that's alive and can think. I mean, we've got cats, and when they don't get to go out, they're in emotional pain. So what we don't want is, we don't want to be perceiving information based on this limited kind of this limited filter, so that only the information that makes me happy gets filtered into my mind or gets allowed in, and all the information that has the potential to make me feel anything other than happy gets filtered out in some way, either completely ignored or altered or distorted in some way. So we need that mechanism. So this is what I was saying before. What I was saying before is that we're going to use our trading. We're going to use the actual, let's say, process of trading to create these mental mechanisms that will cause us to think that, no, this moment is really unique. And that doesn't mean you can't feel or sense or know what's going to happen next, because you can. But it'll be from a different context. It won't be from a rationally based context. It'll be from an intuitively based context. These are worlds apart. Because if it's genuine intuition, it seems like as if I'm going to maybe contradict many of the things that I've said earlier, but if it's genuine intuition, you'll always be right. Because in essence, you're in the zone. That is, that you spontaneously tapped into that framework where you are in complete harmony with, say, with the market consciousness, that collective consciousness of everyone who's participating, and you are in the zone. So it's not a rationally based knowing, it's an intuitive based knowing. But it's our rational mind that'll always, one, keep us from getting into it. Because if I think I know what's happened, if I think I know or believe what's happening at a rational level, it means that my knowing is coming only from my past. Are you guys with me on this? The knowing is coming only from my past. My past cannot, what's that? Well, you can predict the future. You can, anybody can guess the future, and that's not. I'm not saying you can't predict the future, but let's put it this way: my past, based on what's already in my mind, can't know a truly unique moment, because a truly unique moment is something that never existed. My past can only know it afterwards, or my rational mind can only know it after the fact.
So how do you reconcile that with intuition? Because if your intuition is saying go, 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 and
Your intuition won't say go, 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 go. Intuition doesn't work like that. Intuition isn't compelling in any way. Your rational mind is compelling. You feel compelled to do anything, it's coming from your rational mind. Your intuition is just spontaneous. You just find yourself doing things. Your rational mind is the one that's going to pull you out of doing it.
so how do you?
It's like it's doing something without weighing and judging. You see, your rational mind weighs and judges everything based on your past. When you're in that kind of a zone and acting spontaneously and intuitively, you won't be weighing or judging anything. In essence, you'll just be finding yourself doing something. It's like your rational mind will wake up and say, hey, what am I doing?
Mark, it's kind of abstract. Can you just show me? Can you show me a trade that's rationally based versus?
It would, John. It wouldn't make any difference. You see, in terms of showing you a trade, I mean, I could pull up a whole bunch of charts.
I'm just thinking. Tell me a trade that's rationally based, versus. I mean, an example.
Any trade that you think, any trade that's based on a pattern that you know at a rational level would be a rationally based trade. Meaning anything you've already learned about, and it's in your mind as a memory. Whereas something, have you ever had kind of a gut feeling about something, but didn't really have a way to judge it from a rational perspective? That's what I'm talking about. I'll give you an example. I don't even know if I have that chart with me, but there was a chart I was doing a typical pattern I'm going to show you guys later, an ABCD pattern where AB equals CD. It'd be something like. This would be like a 618 retracement, and like this. And these two lines right here, these two waves are exactly equal. And one of the reasons why I use Q charts is because I can click on this line. When I get this wave, when I get this low and this high, and this retracement right here, and I get an isolated low right here where it looks like it might start doing this, what I do is I clone this line, click on this line, I clone it, and I can actually move it here, put it on this low, and see how the market reacts coming up to point D. Okay? Well, I don't remember exactly when it was, but there was what I thought was a perfect ABCD setting up in the Dow. It was last year sometime, and it was on a 60-minute chart. And of course, the higher the time frame the chart, the more significant the move. So I put on my chart buy D. I'm supposed to sell D. Didn't even realize. Buy D, okay, that would be, okay, buy D, okay? So when the market, I actually didn't trade the day that this happened, but the market came up to D and literally just, I mean, blew right through it. I mean, you know, it was like a 150, 200 point move. So that would be something, you know, it's like, see, I don't look at that as being an accident that I made, that I made that kind of an error on the chart by saying buy D instead of sell D.
You know, that has happened to me, and then I spend the next week trying to quantify it. How did I do that? And I can't I don't know how it happened. So I'm in that trader's hell.
Right.
That you talked about.
Right. You know, we're talking about, you know, trading intuitively, and it's really intriguing. But keep something in mind that, you know, Sean just said, is that one of the things I'm going to suggest to you is that even when we get to the point in the workbook where we talk about it, we're talking about it now, but let's say if you haven't trained your rational mind to trust intuitively based information, the best thing to do is just notice it and not trade intuitively, not act on it. Just notice it and write it down and pay attention to it, that every time it happens, so you can start building a backlog or repertoire of rationally based information saying, I can trust this. And there's a reason why I say that is because you can manufacture, you can get so excited about the idea that you can, you know, have this sense of knowing of what's going to happen, that you can, at a rational level, manufacture a feeling that's very similar to that kind of intuitive sense. And the problem is that that manufactured feeling isn't intuition, and you will virtually always be wrong when you're operating out of that sense of, let's say, I call it like a hope that feels like intuition and genuine intuition. What you really have to do is get yourself to the point where you virtually have no potential to hope whatsoever. Like, why would you have to hope for anything? Once you really trust yourself, you don't have to hope for anything. So if you still have the potential to hope that the market does something for you, and that's in essence what you're saying. I'm hoping that the market does this. I'm hoping that the market does this for me. And the only reason why you could hope that the market does anything for you is because you don't feel like you have the resources to trust yourself to do it for yourself. Otherwise, hope wouldn't exist. So as long as you have that potential to manufacture that sense of hope that feels very much like intuition, where you'll find it very difficult to make the distinction between the two, the best thing to do is just not trade intuitively. In other words, don't act on it right away. Let yourself work up a nice repertoire so that you can start trusting yourself. Trusting it, put it that way. And that might take a long time.
You took the example of buying pullbacks,
Mm-hmm.
right? You get a narrow range day or something and you're looking to buy over the top of that. And you say, okay, the rational idea is it's pulled back, we found another level of buyers at this price, and so I'm buying over that resistance prior day. That would be a rational thought, correct?
Yeah.
The intuitive side would be, it's pulled back 3 days, I'm going to go bid here because my gut is, or I intuitively think, most pullbacks last 3 to 4 days, and I'm hoping that I get the bottom.
And I would say that's not intuition.
Right.
Based on the way I define intuition, that's just another rationally based.
That's that manufactured.
Yeah, that could be manufactured, rationally based
if you're
thought
thinking,
process.
it's not like if you
See, you're thinking about it. You're not in it anyway.
Right.
See, the whole point is that you're really not thinking. You're not weighing or judging anything. You're finding yourself doing something. It's like looking at a chart. I'm looking at a chart, and I might have asked myself, 2 or 3 minutes before, where's the next best edge? And all of a sudden I get distracted. And I'm not thinking about where that next best edge is. Then all of a sudden my attention is drawn to a line that I would normally have not paid attention to because it's not part of my repertoire of what the market does. But see, intuitively based information is creative. Creative, think about the definition. Bringing forth something that didn't previously exist. I wouldn't have paid attention to that particular line or that particular level. And all of a sudden I've got my attention drawn to it, and I think, oh, okay, well, you know, let's put an order here. No weighing, no judging, really no thinking. If you're weighing, judging, and thinking, it's not intuition. It's something that's spontaneous. It's just like when I'm writing the Disciplined Trader and Trading in the Zone, and a technique that I'm going to give you in a few minutes. I'd ask myself a question. Now, if think about this. If I ask myself a question, if I thought I really had the answer, I wouldn't have asked the question in the first place. Meaning that I really believe I don't have the answer. I'm not trying to figure out the answer. I'm not doing any analysis, you know, like going through all my memories and trying to work something out, trying to figure out a problem. I'm not doing that. I don't have the answer. And then I forget about the question. Or in that moment. I mean, just you get distracted, you start doing other things. Then all of a sudden, it's like, boom, the information just gets dumped into my brain, or I find myself speaking it without knowing it. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. I didn't think about the information that's in my brain. It's now there, and I got to write it down. And I find that if I don't write it down, it evaporates, and I can't reconstruct it. I can't tell you, how many times. It didn't happen that many times because it was just too painful. But the number of times it did happen where I didn't either write it down right away, or I put it in my computer, didn't save it right away, and something happened to my computer and I lost it. That was like, and then try to reconstruct it at a rational level, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because it wasn't in my brain at a rational level. It wasn't part of my memories. It didn't have anything to stick to because there wasn't really a framework, because it was new information, new for me. So I'm not weighing, I'm not judging, I'm just asking a genuine question because I don't have an answer and I desire the answer. And if the desire is genuine, you will get an answer that corresponds with your question.
Are you saying that a rationally based trade is something that isn't good?
No, I didn't say that at all, Jeff.
Okay.
No, not at all.
Just want to make sure.
I'm not saying any of this is good or any of this is bad. It's just all a function of what you desire, where you want to go, what you want for yourself in your life.
Because the ABCD that you were talking about is a rationally based trade.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
Jeff, I trade rationally. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not.
Okay.
Don't get the impression that this is what I do here. Okay. Not every trade is intuitive.
Okay.
I'm just giving you examples of times that it was. Okay.
Ask one question.
And also, I'm not at a level in my life where I completely and absolutely trust it either. As a trader. I'm still working on it.
The example you gave, that was really an error in your technique. I mean, you made
No.
the mistake of buying instead of selling.
I didn't. First of all, I didn't put an order in the market. Number one. All I'm saying is that I write on the chart what I'm going to do, and what I wrote on the chart was what I should have written. Sell D, and I didn't even notice until the next day where I actually wrote buy D.
Okay. That's not intuitive thinking.
Oh, that to me, yes, absolutely. That's not I don't look at it that way. I don't look at those kinds of errors as being errors, or I don't look at unconscious mistakes as being as not having significance. I don't look at them as sort of a random thing at all. That was let's say at a subconscious level. This information that we're gonna talk about in a minute about where information can come from. 1 second, Jake. Let me do one thing. about the different levels of information. You can say that, that there's the conscious, the subconscious, and I'm looking at the intuitive or spiritual, okay? I would say that particular, whatever, what caused me to type buy and sell came from down here. And I didn't notice it at a conscious level until the next day. Go ahead, Jake.
I was just going to say, if you have an unconscious belief that makes you trade incorrectly, how do you separate that? In other words, it's causing you to make a mistake unconsciously, right? Mm-hmm. How do you separate that from what you describe as intuition?
I'm not sure. Okay, ask me the question again.
Like, in other words, your intuition made you right, sell, buy D.
Yeah, my intuition told me to buy D.
Right.
Okay.
What if, there's something in your brain, which was a bad belief, it caused a trading error that made you say buy here or whatever.
Well, what about it?
It didn't work.
Okay, what about it?
I just say, how do you separate intuition from unconscious belief? It's not aware of it. That's really the question.
Well, very easy. I shouldn't say very easy. It's just that the criteria is if it was the perfect thing to do, it was intuition. Anything less than that, and it was rationally based. And I'm not saying that you can't make a decision at a rational level that can't be perfect. All I'm saying is that your intuition will always, based on my definition and the way that I look at it, you can look at it and define it any way that you want. All I'm saying is that in my framework, in my context, intuition will always cause me to step into an experience in a way that's in complete harmony with the environment that I'm in that moment, based on what my desire is. Would that be a good definition of it? Do you think? Does it make sense?
Basically, it's your goal.
What, Roman?
Basically, it's your goal.
Yeah, it'll cause me to step into an experience in a way that's in perfect harmony with my desire and the environment that I'm in that moment, and the environmental forces I'm operating, let's say, in, or the environmental forces that are attendant upon that situation. Anything less than that, in terms of an outcome, would not be intuition. I know this is really kind of hard and abstract stuff, but you guys can listen to the tape over and over again, or watch the tape, and as a result, start doing your own explorations in terms of how this works in your life and how you might use it. And let me say something else too. That about 5 or 6 years ago, I was invited to speak at the first annual Intuition conference that was in San Diego. And there were, about 200 or 300 people there, and people from all over the world who investigate the nature of intuition. And one of the things that I came out of that conference with was that nobody could agree on a definition of intuition. Not that there was argument. I'm not saying that people were fighting each other. They weren't. I'm just saying that all the different definitions were mind-boggling. Okay. So I'm just giving you one. I'm not saying there aren't more. Do your own investigation and go on your own path and find what works for you. But and I was amazed too at all the different ways that intuition worked in people's lives. I was stunned. So to take a phrase out of, anybody read Conversation with God books by Neale Donald Walsch? Mine is not the only way, it's just another way. So I would say that. And for some of you, it could be a good start,
What I've found over the years is and I'm guilty of, not being consistent with it, but what I try to do is always ask, certain questions, how you can do things better, whether it be business, trading, or other parts of your life. And I definitely find that when you stay on that type of a regimen, it definitely makes a difference. Depending on what you're trying to go, maybe it's the bottom line, maybe it's a relationship, maybe whatever. What ends up happening, at least for me, is, you start noticing a change, and then you suddenly forget that regimen was what got you to that point and you kind of stop doing it.
Sure.
It's so easy to fall off, but if anybody hasn't done that type of stuff here,
To do what? To be asking questions?
just always ask yourself,
Sure.
areas that you're not satisfied with, or even you are satisfied with and want to make better. For me at least, it definitely makes a difference. Which I think is the whole kind of where we are at this point in the conference.
Yeah, we are. And what Greg said yesterday too about we're just writing early in the morning. It's a really good technique. Just write anything. What are the techniques I'm going to give you? We can do it right now for even identifying a belief. It's the exact same technique. Only what I do is put a time constraint on it. In other words, you've got a specific purpose. You could say, let's go here. Go to page. Go to page 1 of section 5. One of the first things I say here is when it comes to doing mental work, your attitude is everything. Meaning whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you'll be right. And that's really true. When you're doing mental work, your attitude about it is virtually everything. So the more you believe in the possibilities that you can do this kind of work, the more benefit you're going to get from it. So if you want to find out, if you want to find out what's in here, okay? First of all, this is at the conscious level. These are the things that we have conscious access to. There may be, you may have conscious beliefs that you have that are in conflict with your desire to accumulate money as a trader. There may be some subconscious, okay? Remember I said yesterday that I think this line between conscious and subconscious is really artificial? In some ways even taught because, when we're children and there are things going on in our minds that our parents can't explain, not only can they not explain it in us, they can't explain it in themselves. They're going to say, just forget about that. Just kind of put it in the back of your mind and just forget about it. And what ends up happening is that the things that we can't explain and we can't deal with, they do, and the things just automatically, in many cases, will drop down to a subconscious level of operation anyway. Okay, but it's like you don't. I'll put it this way: the more you do this kind of work and ask questions, the more this line between conscious and subconscious starts to get perforated and weaker until there really isn't any definition at all. I mean, there isn't any declination between the two at all. You can have access to anything that's in your mind. Not only here, but also here. And it's just a matter of the kind of work that you do. And that work is in essence asking yourself questions. So for an example, I just gave you one example here. You want to find out what's going on? Say to yourself, why can't I accumulate vast sums of money? Now, if I knew the answer to that at a rational level, I wouldn't have to be asking the question in the first place. Now, keep in mind, and I'm going to keep repeating this because I don't know if I have the right words to really convey how important it is that this question be genuine and sincere. Because any lack of sincerity, and you won't get an answer. It's like the forces that exist in the universe, let's say, or exist at these deeper levels. You can't. It's like you can't fool God. If you really don't want an answer, regardless of how much you might say to yourself, yes I do, yes I do, yes I do, if the asking the question isn't genuine and sincere, then you won't get an answer. In other words, you have to be completely honest with yourself. And you will get an answer that corresponds with your level of honesty. So if you're asking a question that you sense you're afraid to get an answer about, then, ask another question that, you might not be so afraid about getting an answer. That you can say sincerely and genuinely that I really do want an answer. I really want to know. Then write that question at the top of a piece of paper. And then give yourself about 20 minutes. And what are you going to do for that 20 minutes? You're going to write. Well, what are you going to write? You already said if I knew the answer, I wouldn't have to ask it in the first place. So what are you going to write? What do you think you're going to write? Just whatever. Write whatever thought comes to your mind, uncensored. Write your stream of consciousness thoughts, whatever comes to your mind, uncensored. Don't censor anything. Don't judge anything. Don't stop and contemplate it. Don't think about it. If the word or the thought or the feeling comes into your consciousness, write it down. And after 20 minutes, you can go back and reread what you've written. In other words, hopefully, once you get used to the idea of writing uncensored, you're going to find that you lose this kind of conscious thought process of judging what you're writing. In other words, you won't be judging it. You're going to so busy trying to write your stream of thoughts that you're not thinking about what you're writing. And then when you go back and reread it, what are you going to be reading? You're going to be discovering yourself. You're going to be reading something that came from your mind onto that piece of paper, and you should have, what'll hopefully end up happening is that you'll read something that corresponds to the question that you wrote. You'll have at least an answer or part of an answer, and there should be enough there for you to ask another question, or to stimulate another question, and then put that question at the top of a piece of paper. And keep on doing it until you get to the source of the original question of why can't I accumulate vast sums of money? Because it may be, that's a big one, by the way. You can do smaller ones, but working on one like that could take quite a long time. Yeah, more than 20 minutes.
So it's like songwriting. It's the same thing. That's how I wrote All of Rock and Roll. It wrote itself in 20 minutes.
Okay, Jake, say that so people can hear it. Okay,
It's like, I'm saying this whole thing is like songwriting, basically. Like I Love Rock and Roll is an example of the biggest song I ever wrote. It was like a complete inspiration. It wrote itself. I was taking dictation. It wrote itself in 20 minutes. It's like automatic. I have no idea where it came from. Actually, I do have an idea. I was listening to the Rolling Stones. It's only rock and roll. I like it. And I had like a knee-jerk reaction to it. I said, what do you mean it's only rock and roll? I love rock and roll. Whoops. 20 minutes.
Wow. Cool. And you're still getting, how long ago did you write that song?
Over 20 years ago.
And you're still getting a pretty substantial income from it, aren't you?
Well, Britney Spears just covered it, so next year would be a good year.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And if you're posing a very deep question like this one, and you can't, as we're talking about it, I'm trying to think of, we have A, B, C, D, E here. I'm trying to think of what things could be inside me.
Those are just examples, by the way.
Right. But when we've been talking about asking questions, and sometimes while you're talking, I'm thinking of things.
Right.
And asking questions, and not coming up with even like the first thing. So you're just a technique to try to uncover that would just
stop
be...
1 second. I would ask, what's stopping me from getting an answer? You said you're not coming up with the first thing, right? Then I would do the technique based on, well, what stops you from giving an answer? And then do that exercise for 20 minutes and write down every thought that comes to your mind. Break it down to it, you know, to like the most fundamental or basic components. I mean, just break your questions down as you know, as far as you can. In fact, kind of a rule of thumb, I'll give you a rule of thumb that I use when you know, in my consulting work and my coaching, is that one, when people when people call up, I help them identify the challenge. That's going to be in relationship to whatever they desire, their goal. Create a process. In other words, how are we going to get there? And then break the process down to its smallest incremental steps. And then just take one step at a time. And so that particular formula you can use for any particular trading skill that you want to learn. Any trading skill at all. If you put it within the context of that formula, if you can think to yourself, you know, I'd like to be able to trade breakouts. I'm not a good breakout trader. That's something I haven't spent any time really, you know, any time teaching myself how to do. So at the time when I'm ready to, you know, to get to the point where I want to, you know, acquire this skill of being an excellent breakout trader, I will create, that's my challenge, I'll create a process, I'll break the process down to its smallest incremental steps and take one step at a time. Another example of that would be a trader that comes to mind that I worked with many years ago. He owned some construction companies down south. He was a guy in his late 50s at the time. You can imagine the kind of guy that would own construction companies, let's say in Dallas, okay? And he'd been trading bond futures and just getting wiped out. So he thought, you know what, he's going to come up to Chicago and show these bond traders something. And bought a seat at the Chicago Board of Trade. I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Anyway, he bought a seat at the Chicago Board of Trade and went into the pit to trade and found out that it was just a little bit more violent and athletic than what he could have imagined. But anyway, I'm sorry. But another one of these situations where someone told him to call me, and so we did, and we spent probably, I don't know, maybe a week or so, a week and a half, where one of the problems he had is he really didn't even know how to define support and resistance, and I was using point and figure charts at the time, which I think are really good, by the way, but there isn't really much software where you can, I don't know of any software that really does true point and figure charting anymore. But anyway, so what I did is I helped him be able to identify support and resistance within a 8 to 10 tick range, okay, in the bonds. So when we got to the point where he was comfortable and we thought he could do this, for the next day, we had support, we had resistance here, support here, and here was the deal. Okay, this guy's a multi-millionaire. Here's the deal. This was the task, and we broke the process down, smallest incremental steps, right? The task was, fortunately, for him to buy one bond contract at support, and hold on to it until if it came to support first, and hold on to it when it came up to resistance, sell it out for the profit, and then sell to, and that was it. Okay, he was supposed to risk 3 ticks, $100. Okay, that's all he was. Now that was the task. He just had to go in, and fortunately for us, in this particular exercise, the market opened up somewhere in the middle right here. And so when the market came down, was coming down to, I don't know what this price was, let's just say it was 09. The market's coming down to 09. he starts getting panicky and thinking that it's not going to get there, number one. And so he bought them at right around 11. And then when it hit 09, he's thinking it's going to keep on going, of course. He sold it out for a 2-tick loss. It bounced off 9, went back up to 19. Okay, and then he did the exact same thing. Came back to the office and was thoroughly exasperated and frustrated with with what happened, right? So the next day he went down there and did the exact same thing, and then after that I didn't hear from him, and I didn't hear from him because he didn't want to have to account to me for the fact that he couldn't do this. Because what are we talking about here? We're talking about $100 brisk. That was it. This is really genuinely less than chump change for this guy. So so I didn't hear from him for about 2 weeks, and then I get a call. Well, as it turned out, after 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, after 2 or 3 weeks, what had happened is that he had gotten pretty good at identifying support and resistance, and he'd also gotten pretty good at buying them at 9, let's say, or selling them at 19, but he was still getting out at 10 or 11 and not holding on, for the full range. So he's only getting a 1 to 2 tick profit. And what was really exasperating for him is that in many cases, it turned out that 09 in this example was the low of the day. Or he'd look back at the end of the day and say, you know what? I bought the low of the day and only got 1 tick. I bought the high of the day and only got 1 tick. So his solution to the problem, what do you think his solution was? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not double up, triple up. Okay, he's a 1-lot trader. Now he's going to be trading 25 or 50 lots, okay? And actually, he'd made some money. He'd made some money in that 2 or 3 weeks. He'd made maybe a couple $1,000s doing this. So yeah, now the problem is, going from a 1-lot trader in the pit to doing 20 or 25 or more, you're dealing with a whole different range or a whole different set of people. And, it's just not easy to step up from 1 to 20. It's just based on the dynamics of the way the pit itself works. And I knew he was going to get his ass handed to him. There wasn't a doubt in my mind about it. I didn't say anything to him. And I said, hey, go ahead. And so it wouldn't have made any difference if I said anything to him or not. So, and that's exactly what happened. He lost all the profits he made, plus another $2,000 or $3,000, and then he said, okay, like this, okay, I'm ready, what do I need to do?